It's time to unleash the inner beast, because it's getting abnormal dark outside. Stand up! Vanguard! Alright, and with that we are starting our Dark Irregulars set review for AL4 Strongest team. And yeah, you guys are familiar with the drill, and like always, same ratings, same things we're going to do. So let's not beat around the bush and let's jump right into the cards we got for Dark Irregulars. Alright, we start off with the triggers, and just like any other, 2 stars. And the starter for Dark Irregulars they got was Vermilion Gatekeeper, and also for him, 4 stars. We also got a vanilla protect marker clan thing, or how you want to name this thing. But just like all the others, I only give it 1 star. Alright, now we're getting to the interesting cards. And first up we have Werewolf Freiwilliger. And it generates just a lot of soul and gives a minor amount of power on the field. But it minus you also rear guard. And there's not a lot of draw potential in Dark Irregulars, so I'm not really fond of this card, and that's why I only give it 1 star, because I don't think it functions that well with all the other cards. Alright, next up we have Werebear for Vulgar. And seen as some results were already in Japan, and a lot of people are talking about this card, of how this card functions in the deck, I think this card is pretty good. Because the problem with Dark Irregulars now is that they don't have a definitive end game like all the other Protect clans. They have their VR, but besides that they don't have any other kind of play like Basker that has the continuous crit or those Skull Dragons. Or in Oracle Think Tank case that they have the Deer turn. They don't have that Dark Irregulars. So a card like this is very useful, using it mid to late game to be able to put out high number pressure columns. And if you need to waste the counters, that's not really that of an issue, because you don't really use counterless that much, and you have some options to negate that, so that's actually pretty fine. So that's why we'll give this card actually a 5-star rating. Another common card from this set that I give 5 stars. But for good apples we also have bad apples, and this card is one of those. And I don't think this card is very good, because it functions only with itself if one is in the soul, and for a very annoying condition you basically get a minor utility from it. So I will give this one 1 star, and let's just move on. Alright, next up we have Obstacle Offender. And this is basically just another offender for the deck and for the clan in general, because this is another 1-star card that I don't think we're going to see, because those extra guard options, I don't think we need that in a Protect clan, and we just want to be able to put consistency pressure or consistent draw power or anything that works with the consistency of the deck. This thing does nothing for that. Alright, next up we have Terrifying Fist. And the first of Great Freeze. Sadly, no marker. But it's a rear guard, has a decent rear guard effect that it can soul charge and generate power, and the amount of power it gains is dependent on what you had soul charge. Basically the same how Pongo worked. And it's pretty decent, but the fact that it has no marker is a pretty big downside of the card. And that's why I only will give it 2 stars. It will help with soul, it's a really good rear guard effect, and but the fact that it doesn't have a marker hurts it a lot. Alright, next up we have the Vanilla PG, 2 stars. Next we have Prisoner Beast, and it's basically a soul charge and a 10k attacker or 10k booster. 10k booster is pretty solid, and it helped with soul charge because it's on play soul charge, and it's just a solid card. And it function well with everything else, so that's why we'll give it 3 stars, because it's just a solid card. Alright, next up we have Blood Sacrifice Ruthven. And at first I really didn't like the card, because of the condition and the way that the card works was very narrow and very specific, because it only works with For All Claws. But knowing that you need to have counter charge, and For All Claws is the one that enables the counter charge, that makes this card a lot better, because it also works from the drop zone as well as from the damage zone. And that makes this card very, very interesting, because it generates soul, and it gains counter charge, and For All Claws also helps with another option, another skill with soul and other good stuff. So combining the two, it's a very good card. And I think you are basically forced to run it if you need to counter charge. So that's why I will give it 4 stars, because it's your best options for that for now. Alright, next up we have Werewolf Seeker. And this one is the one that is combined with Werebear Verwolger, because you need to either run this thing or that card in the current decks that we've seen in Japan. And a lot of people are cutting this card more in favor of the Werebear, because this card doesn't really add to mid to late game pressure, because it's basically a 40k attacker and the Werebear can become way higher. But the usefulness of this card is the fact that every time that it attacks the Vanguard, you soul charge 2. Downside to the card is that it is a mandatory effect. So keep that in mind. If you play this card for late game, you are mandatory to soul charge 2 cards. But the soul, it helps with adding more soul, because we have a lot of only on plays or once per card effects for soul charge. And this is one of those effects that you can keep generating more soul. So that makes the card a lot more useful than most soul charge cards that we have in the clan for now. So that's why I will give it still a 4-star rating, even though there are rumors that the cards is going to be scrapped from most decks. But I think we in the West still need to be able to try it out, test it. I think it still has a place in the deck though. Alright, next up we have Ghoulish Dispoler. And I think this card is actually pretty decent. It has a protect marker, and it has some very interesting and very useful Vanguard skills. It can gain 10k if you have enough soul, so it becomes a decent amount of power. But you can also get a lot of soul, but also fetch a grade 2 or a certain key piece from your soul. So if you soul charge all your attackers, you can gain them with this card's effect back into your hand, and you can then call them to the Vanguard circle. And because you soul charge 2 cards, you basically are net plusing 1 on your soul. So that's pretty decent. And I think it's a pretty good card to run in your deck, maybe a tech option for 1 or 2, because as how the VR works, in combination with this card, you can combine the two very easily if you want to. So that's why I will give this card 4 stars, because it helps with getting maybe utility cards from your soul if you don't have the attack options. And it works, you can combine it for a little combo with the VR. So that's pretty good in my opinion. Alright, next up we have the Perfect Guard drop trigger. 5 stars. And now we're getting to the other high rarity cards, and we have During Defroster. And this is basically your very strong booster that can generate a lot of power to columns. The only downside to the card is to gain the power, you need to keep soul charging every turn a couple of cards. And like stated, there aren't really that lot of cards that keep generating soul. It's basically on place or once per use that the skill works, and that's about it. It's basically a way to enable power and pressure, and that's why we'll give this card 4 stars. Alright, next up we have Dream Eater, and I was very on the fence about this one, because at first glance when this card was revealed, I didn't really like the fact that you need to soul blast 10 cards for only a guard restrict of that your opponent cannot use Sentinels. But it gains power, and you can draw with the other for the counter blast, so with that regard, it's okay. But the usefulness of the card is her first skill, that everything that you guard is retired, you can put it into the soul. So you stack incredibly fast with your souls. That's very, very good. The other thing is, you can combine it with your VR to be able to put a gigantic pressure column that's getting a crit, let's say 33, 32, or maybe even more if you have a good strong booster. And you cannot guard it with Sentinels, so you need to guard with a lot of cards from it. And it has a crit. So, and you're putting a lot of wriggles in your soul. So if, let's say, you have Doreen behind the Vanguard, and you have put 4 cards in your soul, because 4 wriggles went into the soul, and we have soul charge a couple of times in the turn, maybe we have a 60k attack that you cannot use Sentinels, and it has a crit. That's suddenly an overpowered version of Waterfall in a Protect clan. That's pretty decent. That's pretty good. And you can even combine all those skills. So that's why we'll give this card definitely 5 stars, because it works well and combines a lot of things, and you can make some nasty combinations with it. Alright, next up we have Raw Claws. I already discussed a little bit about this one when I talked about Ruthven. And basically, as you can see, this card can generate a lot of power if you combine it with Ruthven, because you can counter charge and gain power. But also if you do it in a defense state, you can basically guard with this one. It will go into it will be retired, and at the same time, if you have Dream Eater as your Vanguard, you can put this one into soul and soul charge, so you get even more soul. So that's pretty decent. You can also guard with this one. It goes to drop, so you can soul charge one, and then use Ruthven's skill to then put it in the soul and counter charge, and then give maybe 10k power or any kind of effect. So the combination with the two to get power more to the field is very good and very handy for those kill turns or those high pressure turns. So that's why I give this card definitely 4-star rating, because it has a lot of utility option. The only downside is that if you want to use this card correctly and good, then you need to run Ruthven. So it's a 2-card combo that basically is necessary to run both if you want to use those skills to max potential. Now we're getting to our very second to last card, and that's Gwyn the Ripper. And it's just a generic card, a good card that soul charge and it retires something if you have enough soul. And basically, you use this card when you can retire something. So you can soul charge one and then counter plus one and retire something from your opponent. It's just a good mid to late game card for those nasty combo pieces of cards, because you're the one is choosing the one you want to retire. So that's just solid on all fields. So that's why I'll give this one 4 stars for Gwyn the Ripper, because it's just a solid card. I don't think it's that mandatory for most decks, but I think it's a solid addition to your Dark Irregulars deck as of now. Now we have I've referenced this card with a lot of great trees, and well, that's not really that weird when you see the skill, because No Life King, Death Anchor, the VR of Dark Irregulars, is pretty infamous. Especially in Premium, because this thing can make an OTK turn that you can keep swinging with your Vanguard for every counterblast that you have, and will become even stronger every time that you keep attacking, and you can also attack with your rearguards. So that makes this card very strong. In Standard we cannot do that, but we can do in Standard, we can do other combinations. We can do it with Demon Eater, for example. That you first attack with this thing, then use Demon, then rewrite the Demon Eater, that Demon Eater get a crit, then add more power to Dream Eater and all those kinds of shenanigans, then attack for a very strong attack where you cannot Sentinel and it has a crit. So basically, the Dark Irregulars version of Waterfall. You can also combine it with Ghoulish, the spoiler, if you don't have another option. You can go into that thing, also gain a little bit power, and maybe use its skill to add extra cards to your hand. Also mind the fact that you get extra protect markers, because you're rewriting a Great 3 that has a protect marker. So that makes it very strong. But also, if you really want to keep sitting on Anchor itself, you can just rewrite itself and use the skill to gain a lot of power, to soul charge more cards, and just sitting on a high power attacker with a crit. But you don't have any guard restrict, so depending on the situation, that can be the thing you want or not. But you have a lot of options with this card. The only downside is to a lot of things in Dark Irregulars now, is that you don't have a lot of draw options, and you are putting rearguards from your field into the soul. So it's the question how long you can sustain this, and how many times you can use some skills. So it's depending on the player how they can manage basically their card resources from hand and to the end of the field, and use those cards most effectively and efficiently to finish the game. And with that said, that rounds out this set review for Dark Irregulars. And they have a lot of interesting cards, although as stated, they don't really have a definitive endgame play. They have the Death Anchor, and they have some options with Dream Eater and other cards. But at the same time, it's not really that cleared out like a Deer turn, or the way how Beskirk with the Dragons work, because you don't really have that amount of, you don't really have the card draw on first glance to sustain it, because you're minusing 3, and if you use the Dream Eater combo, it's minusing 4 of rearguards, and all the other grade 2 rearguards and grade 1s aren't really that powerful or strong, and that's the reason why a lot of people are considering to run the grade 2 common, the Bear, because it itself generates a lot of power, because it gains a lot of power for every card in the soul. Although it costs a counterblast, but at the same time, there aren't really that lot of cards that cost counterblast that you are mandatory to run. So that's why you have the luxury to run that card. So it's really depending on how the player wants to build the deck. But as of now, there isn't really that much option to build a deck. It's just how you want to end your deck, how you want to play, what kind of end combo you want to play. That's how the deck building it can be vary from person to person. So I'm very curious of what you guys think of Dark Irregulars and what they got in this support. And yeah, if you are agreeing with me, my decision of rating this card, of what I think of the cards and my arguments. So let me know down below with the comments what you think of this support for Dark Irregulars. And I'll maybe see you guys tomorrow when I'm talking about Murakumo. So as always, I'm Mr. Tiny. And I see you guys in the next one.